Welcome back to the Making a Multi-Million-Dollar Medspa podcast, where we have real conversations about what it takes to run a successful business. Thank you for joining us as we share our day-to-day successes and, even more importantly, failures and mistakes. Listen in as we host some of our peers, colleagues, and other experts in the field. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome to Season 4 of the Making a Multi-Million-Dollar Medspa podcast. This season promises to be a fan favorite with exceptional guests, valuable insights, and a new host. Each guest will be participating in 2 episodes. The first, like the one you're listening to right now, introduces the guest, helps you get to know them, and identifies their area of expertise. Listen to each episode and submit any questions you have to the guest to answer. Your questions will be used to create the Part 2 follow-up episode that will be added to our e-courses. Questions can be submitted through Instagram, via email, or at the link in our show notes. We hope you'll join us and share some of your questions along the way. Now on to the episode.
Hey there, this is Jay Burns. We're having our premiere podcast today with Men Aesthetics with a really... I'd say a good friend of mine. I would say a colleague that I admire a ton. He was one of the first names that popped in my mind when I wanted to do this, and it's Vic Ross. He's out in California. Vic, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Jay. Honored to be a part of this.
Yeah, well, I'll just do a little impromptu. I don't have anything written down because I don't need to with you, but I was just thinking about it in the last hour when I'm getting ready to prepare for this a little bit. Was that you and I go back a long way. We've been on so many SAB, scientific advisory boards together. And I will tell you, when I was starting out, Vic jumped off the page at me for being a scientist. I've discovered over the years he's got a wicked, dry sense of humor, which parallels with mine. It's hilarious. But he's just an amazing scientist. And I've always, anything he writes, I always read with great interest because it's always well thought out, and I've learned a ton from you. Maybe not just even the publications, but the text messages and the dinners and the SABs. So I'm just really excited to have you here. We're going to get started with, let's start with what jumped off. I've got some things, your CV and some of the questions we sent, but I want to start off. I didn't know. I always think of you being in the Navy and West Coast, and what jumped off the page was October 27th, 1960. You were born in Yazoo City, Mississippi. Tell me what Yazoo's like,
Yazoo City was just named by Forbes magazine 3 years ago the worst city in America. So
no, is that true?
Not in Mississippi, but in America. Well, some of the people said it wasn't true. They actually went to several people who lived there, and they said they had a Walmart supercenter. How could it be the worst city in America with a Walmart supercenter? But I only lived there for 5 years, so that's so I don't know it that well. But that's where they started out. Yeah,
and then where did you move after that?
We went after that to we went to New Orleans because my dad was doing his residency. So I was in New Orleans, then Biloxi, then Gulfport, and
all right. I saw you were in Tulane, so you followed your dad, and I didn't really know. Tell me about your dad. He was a physician as well. What kind?
Yeah, he's a radiologist, and he's still alive at 92, but he's not doing radiology anymore. But he was a radiologist for a long time. All right,
and okay, and your mom, and do you have a family? Do you have any siblings?
Mom's from New Orleans. She's still living in Houston, and my brother and sister live in Houston as well, both engineers.
Okay, all right, runs in the family. Well, I also was looking over your CV. I'm not really surprised, but just to tell the audience that you graduated from medical school with honors, but I saw a lot of physics. Most outstanding senior physics major. I did a junior research fellow in nuclear physics. It's turned in. No wonder you're so well spoken. And then you also trained at Wellman Lab in Boston with rocks. I'm assuming you were one of the. When did he start that fellowship? You had to.
I think Suzanne Kilmer might have been his first fellow around 1991, and I came about 4 years later. He had like 2 or 3 fellows previous to me.
All right, and I'm just going over this for the last time. We'll move on after this, but I know that you and I both have been very active in the American Society of Lasers in surgery and medicine, and I think that you and I were presidents back to back one year. So you've done the political side as well. So Anyway, I just let's get started, Vic. I wanted to just ask them a little bit about I just want to get part of the reason that we do this podcast is I want people to get to know you, and I know that it's hard in an hour, but I just like who had the greatest impact on you growing up. Some people, I mean, over a span of years, from parents to professors to anybody like that. Who stands out?
Obviously my parents. My dad was a physician. My mom was a hard worker, valedictorian in her high school in New Orleans. So I was lucky to be born to her. And then I had great teachers. A lot of the Catholic nuns taught me in Biloxi and Gulfport, Mississippi, and they were good. They were hard. If you made a mistake, they hit you with a ruler.
Yeah, there you go.
It didn't have to be a behavioral mistake. It could be I missed abbreviated doctor, DOC period. And Sister Dolores, she was kind of playful about it, but she said, Vic, your dad's a doctor. You can't do that. She came up to class and she had to hit me with the thing, in 5th or 6th grade. So they were good because they got you motivated, and they were really my best teachers. Some of my best teachers were my early teachers, and then in college had some great teachers at Mississippi State, which people don't think about these state schools as being great schools sometimes, but I got a great education there, and the professors were great, and I was fortunate to be a part of that school. So I was lucky, and then med school the same way. But I think Mississippi State, the physics professors there were really, really good.
It's interesting you should say that. And I think that I've always thought, maybe I don't really feel like I have a chip on my shoulder, but I always know that I competed against guys from Harvard and Yale and whatever. And I went to Baylor University in Waco. And I've always thought that if God endowed you with a few brain cells and you worked hard, you really could probably do well at almost any college, at least when we were at that point. So you kind of corroborated my my thoughts on the topic. You've been to Harvard and Mississippi State, and I think it's awesome that the
top girl in our med school class, top person in our medical class, was from Kansas State. She wasn't from Harvard. We had a lot of Ivy League kids in our med school class at Tulane, but none of them really did that well academically. They were good people and everything, but the top students typically were the ones from University of Louisiana, Lafayette, Kansas State, other places like that. It wasn't always these highfalutin places.
Yeah, I agree. The only place that I've seen that for people that are listening, the only time that I think that is the exception at Harvard is doing the research. I'm sure there's many exceptions on research, but the research, I think that I didn't even know about it. And had I known about it, there's no way I would have gotten in because I was a plastic surgeon. But I said training with rocks was that's got to be that's Harvard, but that's got to be most of his fellows have gone on to do great things. Wouldn't you say that's pretty amazing?
Yeah, I just had lunch with him in Korea 2 days ago, and I told Rox at the end of a meeting he was chairing, I said, Rox, you gave me the escape velocity to get out of regular dermatology. You gave me that. Somebody has to push you and nudge you and give you that enthusiasm and passion that he has. And that's what he did for me. He gave me opportunities that I wouldn't have had. It wasn't just the facilities. He's just a bright guy, and he's willing to give his knowledge up, and he's a good teacher and very unassuming. You would never walk up to this guy and just think, based on just talking to him colloquially, that this guy is just one of the brightest guys in the world.
Yeah, I talked to him in April, Vic. I tell you the story just real quick, but I walked up to him and I said, I just thought about it recently. My wife's had some illness. We've had, some family, sickness and tragedy. It makes you kind of have a perspective. And it was all about that time. And I saw him and I said, I got the ability to speak at the Harvard course with Dover when I was a young kid, in 1988. And Rock saw something and put me on the first advisory board. I don't know if it was the Ruby Laser or it was something, but and I probably met you there, but pretty soon after that. But Rock's made my career, by putting me on these advisory boards, getting me introduced to industry, and so we both owe him a debt of gratitude. So yeah. So well, listen, I want to get back to a little bit. Let's go. We'll come back to this a little bit, but in terms of Vic, I see you as a guy that really explores so many treatments. It just seems like if I want to know something, I'll email you and text you, and you've had it 5 years before I have, or 10 years before I have. But I wanted to know right now. I think I know what you're going to say because we talked about it. You mentioned it the other day. But right now, your favorite treatments you're at Scripps now, and you're head of dermatology there. Well, before you ask that, tell us about Scripps. What does that look like?
Yeah, so Scripps is a big 900 physician multi-specialty group. We have about 20 dermatologists. I'm actually the head of the laser section. The boss is a regular dermatologist, but we have about 18 dermatologists. It's a huge institution, and I'm the only one who really does most of the laser stuff among the dermatologists. And I have a little center here with about 45 pieces of equipment. I'm very fortunate to have a good support staff, good nurses. It's a good place to be. I mean, it's not your practice. You have some control issues, but overall, it's a very good place to be.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about what you like to do, your favorite treatments right now. You mentioned it the other day, but I thought it'd be helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
My favorite treatments are treatments that work. You know, Cyton has this thing, results matter, and I don't really work with Cyton anymore, but it's a good logo, and it kind of speaks to what they do and some other companies do, where you try to treat things that are easy to treat. I hate to say the things that are easiest to treat are also the things that tend to have the best outcomes and tend to be the most predictable. So I focus on that and try to perfect that. So the typical patient that sees us is a person with red and brown spots and some wrinkles, and we'll oftentimes do this sort of combo treatment.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are doing combo treatment, and, obviously I do work with Cyton, but, and others, but so tell me if I walked in, I've got a face full of wrinkles, but I'm getting my reds and browns taken care of. I do 3 or 4 laser treatments a year, if not more. So tell me what you would do to the average patient that walks in that you're going to get you're pretty sure you're going to get a really good result, and the patient's going to be happy. What do you do?
Yeah, so a typical patient comes in with red and brown dyschromia and some wrinkles, mild wrinkling, usually anywhere from 45 to 60, 65. They come in, I have my laptop with me. I kind of hold it with them and show them a bunch of before and after pictures and go over why we're doing it and what makes sense. And we generally put numbing cream on if they agree to do the procedure. And after about 45 minutes, we bring them over to this main laser room. It's sort of center court like Wimbledon. We have one laser room that's sort of the major room. And we have all these other rooms, and they're good rooms too. We have 2 rooms that what I would consider they're fully stocked. They have one vascular laser, one IPL, one Q-switch laser, and one resurfacing laser. So we have 2 rooms stocked like that. So if I'm busy, the other provider can use it. But basically, when you come in with red and brown dyschromia and fine lines, you're going to get usually the IPL on the lateral cheeks and forehead. The mid cheeks and nose get a vascular laser. Typically, it's a 532 laser, which can be the XLV or the DermaV. And then we treat low contrast lesions with the Q-switch Alexandrite laser or the Q-switch 532 laser. At the very end, I do a fractional 1927. So we call that the works. That's what the nurses call the works. Maybe I should trademark that. But one of my buddies does like 7 things. He calls it hang 7 or hang 10 because he's here in San Diego. But that's kind of what we do. And I may include a neuromodulator and filler if they have other issues. But that's sort of the 4 types of devices I bring to bear on a typical patient who walks in here. And if they don't have red or brown spots, we'll forego some of those other things. But that's my standard. I say I see 30 patients a day, probably 7 patients a day or 6 get that kind of work over.
I see. And so are there any I have the DermaV as well and really like that laser as well, and I use a lot of the Cyton's version of the IPL, the BBL. So, and I also have you said the 1927, and I have one of those as well. It's very much the same kind of treatment that I've found to be very, 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 very helpful. Tell me, are there any pearls that you might tell people out there, to watch out for, or things that you do that you think are things that if you're doing that, really take it and either make it better or make it safer? I mean, I don't know. Is there anything? Am I asking the right question for you?
That's a great question. Yeah, I agree. I'm always trying to perfect it because my goal is to get the best results with one treatment. I tell people, they say, well, I come back for 6 times. No, I'm going to do it today and send me pictures in like 3 weeks and maybe a touch up. But my plan is not to have you do like 5 or 6 treatments every year. We might just do this yearly, but we're not going to plan on doing it every year. So the little tidbits that I use that I think make a little better. One of the systems has a skin pigment meter for the IPL, and I'll measure the pigment. That gives me a little bit of the ability to maybe use more aggressive settings. And if I didn't have that pigment meter, like in Texas, we have a lot of tan patients even in the winter. And so I'm constantly dealing with when I say tanned, I don't mean they come back from Maui and they have an acute tan. I mean chronically bronzed patients. They have this chronic, very common. So I'll be really careful on the lateral cheeks and the forehead because those areas tend to be a little bit more fragile as far as I think accommodating the IPL. So we try that to be safe but aggressive. I mean, it's kind of a seesaw trying to balance those two. I'd rather undertreat than overtreat, but I don't want to undertreat too much. And then the pro of the vascular is tough on some patients because of the swelling, particularly with 532. And I haven't found a great way to avoid that. But that's sometimes we'll use clobetasol 3 days before the treatment. And of course, if somebody has severe swelling, we'll have them take a little prednisone 20 milligrams an hour before when we do the numbing, and then the 20 milligrams at night. That helps quite a bit. Ice helps, but sometimes the swelling with 532 is sort of unpredictable. The other two parts are kind of safe. The 1927 and the Q-switch Alex, you kind of treat people the same way, other than the fact that if people have less pigment, I'll go with lower settings with the fractional device, and higher settings if they're less pigmented and more damaged as far as sun damage for lighter patients. But one thing we always have here is a lot of patients have a hybrid. They have melasma and they have lentiginous at the same time. And that's a real challenge because when you put the laser on them, the lentiginous will magically get better, but then the melasma will over a few weeks get worse. And so that's a big battle we have. So we try to use clobetasol after the treatment and put them on bleaching creams as early as 2 or 3 weeks after the treatment. But those are little tidbits that we have that we try to use to optimize the session that they have here.
Yeah. I'm learning something already, but I mean, when I was one of the things, the pearls that I got when I was interviewing Jill is, Jill Weibel in Miami for their listeners, but, I think we both respect her a lot. She has a lot of people of in the dark skin types. And she was telling me she really rarely has much problem with PIH in that group. And she does aggressive clobetasol for 3 days, and then she ices them in the office. And so we've started that protocol and icing them for 3 days with the clobetasol for 3 days. And it's really, really allowed us to treat PIH and people of color so much more effectively than we ever used to. So it's nice to hear that you're doing the same thing. Tell me a little bit about, go back. I'm not sure. You use the Q-switch Alex. Tell me about that and what you're going specifically for with that device.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great wavelength because the vascular disruption is a lot better than with Q-switch 532. So I'm going after their low contrast lesions. So you see the darkening after the IPL of the darker lentiginous, and you have these really light, almost tan colored macules. And those are really hard. And you can spot treat them with IPL. Some of the devices have an adapter. Cyton has an adapter. Luminous has different sapphire tips. Palomar has an adapter, Cynosure, to focus in on those small areas with higher fluences and shorter pulses. But nothing really works as well for discrete, lightly pigmented lesions, in my opinion, as a Q-switch laser or pico laser. It has to be a short pulse laser. The Alex is great because there's not as much vascular disruption, like I said, as far as 532. So you tend to get less PIH. So that's the advantage of it.
Have you hit a wall when it comes to figuring out the right management strategies and marketing promotions for your clinic? Those feelings of overwhelm and uncertainty don't mean you're failing. You just need the right tools. Mint Aesthetics is hosting a management and marketing group training event on November 15th and 16th to support attendees in their search for processes and strategies that align with their clinic. Join the immersive session to get the tools you need to take your clinic to the next level. The training event will be a collaborative training process of identifying your clinic's needs and seeing how aesthetic care's successful processes can be adapted to work for you. To be clear, this isn't going to give you a copy and paste solution. You'll connect with the identity of your practice, clarify your goals, and determine where you want to take your clinic. Our team will simply be there to support you on that journey. Ready to get started? Register today at mintaesthetics.com/group training. We hope to see you soon in Kansas City.
And do you use it as a just almost a painting wand, or do you?
I hit discrete lesions, but if I have the hand, I'll go pretty fast. I go at 3 or 4 hertz, so I'll go bang, 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 and get the lentiginous off pretty fast. The whitening is the endpoint you look for with that. And you can go pretty fast. I use it for men a lot, darker men. Like if I have a Hispanic male with darker skin, he has a lot of lentiginous there. Even some thicker ones you can pulse stack. Fitzpatrick used to teach us that. He would take the Q Alex with a Tri-Vantage, which is unfortunately no longer manufactured, but he would just go hit that thing at 4 hertz over and over and over again until the seb carrier would kind of just blow off. It's very safe. You can really stack with that laser pretty safely, unlike long pulse technology. So that's a good trick for getting some of these kind of lighter seb carriers and some of these fine, lightly pigmented lesions.
Yeah. So we have people that are going to be watching this that have a lot of lasers, and we have some people just starting out in their career who are not going to be able to have all that. I would make a comment. I find it interesting because stacking is all the rage right now. I mean, it's like we're combining everything, and we did that. And I told somebody the other day, we did that a lot, when CO2 was, the poster child in 95, and then it started seeing some complications, and it got its knees cut out from about 2000. We were looking for alternatives. So I remember we were stacking the, low dose pulse dye laser, the cool touch, and all these things. And I used to say, the reason somebody said, why didn't stacking work back then? I said, because 0 + 0 + 0 = 0. Now we have a lot of lasers that actually work, and we're seeing results. I don't know if you feel that way, but I feel like we're seeing the best results we've ever seen right now in the non-surgical approach to skin. I would love your comments on that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we have a lot of weapons in the utility belt that we didn't have 30 years ago. And we have some reasonably decent skin tightening devices, better than some of the ones that came out 20 years ago. And we have more reliable technologies and bigger spots with the IPLs and everything. So I think we can do a lot more stuff. There are a lot of things we don't do well. Melasma, I think non-invasive tightening and contouring still isn't where it needs to be, although it's better than it was maybe 25 years ago. But I think the things that we've done well we do better now, and a lot of that's the technology, but we have a lot of room to kind of roam in some of the more challenging, unpredictable outcome categories like tightening and contouring.
Well, tell me a little bit about, I know it's a tough topic, but we're going to get questions about it. But, when we do these follow-up podcasts, sometimes I can just tell you it's going to be stria, melasma, PIH, tightening, all the things that are tough. So where are you? I remember calling you a lot about radio frequency because I trusted you. And then I went on my own journey, and I won't tell you where I landed, but where are you now with skin tightening? If you've done all those things, they love Vic Ross, and they want to come back and they want to say, hey, can you do anything about tightening my neck at all or my face a little bit? Where do you go?
Yeah, I mean, if we take CO2 laser off the table, because that does provide pretty reliable tightening, but at a cost of downtime. But if you take that off the table, when you kind of compartmentalize it to non-invasive skin tightening, then I think one of the more reliable things I use is radio frequency microneedling. And one thing I failed to mention when I do that quartet thing with the 4 lasers, if somebody has some jowling here and these Venetian blind type lines here, I'll add an RF microneedling device in the same session at the very end. Likewise for the neck. So I do add that as an option. So it's kind of like a sushi menu. I have those different things down there. At the end, I'll put an option for RF microneedling. And it's normally the Genius. We also have the Silpherm X. We also have the old Infinity. And they work pretty well, all 3 of those. We've had other devices in the past. I think they're more the same than different. Like I said, I was in Korea this weekend, and most of the devices are made in Korea. The Potenza is made in Korea. It's JASIS. And so a lot of Secret RF, that's a Qterra's device, which is made by another Korean company, Aluda. So a lot of those devices, Morpheus, I mean, there's so many of those devices out there, and they're more the same than different, but there's some little subtle things that we've studied that make certain devices, I think, stand out more than others in certain categories.
Yeah, and so it sounds like to me that what you said is you've landed where I've landed. You've had all the devices. I've had about 5 of them. I went through the same journey you did. You had a couple more there that I didn't have, but I landed on the Genius as well. I've seen better results with that, in my opinion. And I was just surprised, Vic, because I think you and I were on the Thermage team together. And the thing that got me, I'd love your comments on this, but as people are navigating, you've given them 7 or 8 options. And so we can say anything we want to. We're not sponsored here and whatever. But on the other hand, what I was surprised with is we always would say the thing that got us was impedance, that we couldn't measure it back then. And we said, if we could only stick a needle in the skin. And so now we're sticking a needle in the skin. And so I thought they were all, naively, I thought they all knew that, and that they were all measuring impedance or temperature and using that during the treatment. And there's really not many at all that do it. Genius does it. Genius does it extremely well. And that's why I choose Genius.
Yeah, I agree. And that was the big push for that device, was it does real-time impedance measuring and real-time power delivery. So when you're done, at least you're getting 60 or 70% of what you think you're putting in. Other devices, it might be 10 or 15%. And a lot of it has to do with the needle design, the localized impedance of the skin. So what happens during that 200, 300, 400 millisecond pulse is the impedance changes too. So a lot of changes. And some devices are designed to use very short pulses, like 20 or 30 milliseconds. So there's a lot of variability among the devices. One of the things I've seen, having started doing this in 2014 with radiofrequency microneedling, is that the pain is proportional to some degree to the results. And you put in very short pulses and very low powers, it's just microneedling. And we got some biopsies when we did that, and you could barely see the injuries. So if you want robust injuries, you have to create some heat. And if you create heat, you're going to create pain. And when you create pain, you got to use anesthesia. So I think that's a conundrum that I know a lot of the companies want to do all this with topical cream, and you can get by with topical cream with RF microneedling in certain patients in small areas and with certain devices in certain settings. But when you go to aggressive settings and delivering a lot of heat, in our study we actually measured with an oscilloscope. We're measuring the energy in before the commercial device for Genius. We were putting in as much as 8 joules. It won't allow you to do that anymore. We're putting 8 joules of pulse. So a lot, almost 100 millijoules, 120 millijoules per pin. That's a lot of energy, and we got big welts. But we did local anesthesia, and the results were better. I think the limit now is like 7 watts and 600 milliseconds. I think you can't put any more than about 5 joules of pulse right now, which is adequate. You'll still get some reasonably good wounds in the skin. But there are a lot of controversy about RF microneedling, insulated needles versus non-insulated. This all came up again in Korea this weekend. Probably insulated versus non-insulated doesn't make as big a difference as we would think. But I think the device you use a lot and get better with is probably the one you're going to get the best results with. I think all these devices can work if you can optimize them within your practice and use them a lot.
Right. Yeah. So for the listeners here, I know that we may not have helped you on that. I hope we did, but I think that it just makes a lot of sense for me if you're looking at RF, some of the things that make a difference that I would be looking at least, rather than, singling one out, is, sharp needles make a difference, and I think that, if you can measure the impedance and then control it and control your energy output based on that impedance as it changes, that's a pretty elegant way to do that. And there's just a couple that do that. So that's just my 2 cents, but we can come back to that if we have some Q&A. One thing I was going to ask you, Vic, is, you wrote a paper that I looked at a lot when I was switching over. I did CO2 for a number of years, and then I started playing with erbium, and I played with erbium kind of almost by myself for many, many years. And I think I know that you still love CO2 and use it. And, I think across the country, there's a lot of move toward erbium. But the article that you wrote that I looked about, I can still see those graphs, if I can remember correctly, that CO2 had a different mechanism of action, different histology response and more inflammation than erbium, which always concerned me and made me not want to leave CO2 and add a lot of heat to my erbium. And now I just published a paper now in January of 2019 that compared my CO2. It was exactly the same paper with 2 different devices, and the results are about the same. And I just was wondering if you would comment on that, because I think CO2 in the right hands is still a great laser, and I think erbium is a great laser. And I just wondered, I worried about it for so long, but I just wonder if you want to comment about the differences between those two and where you are and why you've stayed with CO2.
Yeah, I mean, we had the first erbium laser in the lab. They brought it over in 1995. Paul Wiener brought it over.
Yeah.
And then we put it in the lab. He was trying to put it through a fiber, and we actually burned 3 fibers, almost burned the Wellman lab down. So we went to an arm after that. That was a big thing because erbium was already being used by Hohenotner and another guy over in Germany back in 93, 94. They published several papers, but we didn't really have the device in America. And we did a study, Khalil Khatri and I, we did half CO2 and half erbium on perioral wrinkles. And the thing about erbium I remember was we did a whole face on somebody, real settings. I think it was like a joule per centimeter squared, like 2 passes. But when the patient left, I thought, wow, I feel like we've done a lot. Sound was loud, and she had a little bleeding, pinpoint bleeding. And then 2 days later, there was a lady in the waiting area, and they brought her back, and they said, that's the patient resurfaced. And I said, that can't be her. She's like all healed up. And I didn't really realize at the time, how much the thermal damage really delayed the healing. I always say thermal damage is a two-edged sword. It promotes inflammation, promotes collagen deposition, but also if it's done in excess, it prolongs downtime and increases the risk of scarring and infection. So it is truly a tale of two lasers. I mean, I could get good results, and you could too, with either like the Cyton profile or the Ultra Pulse or the the 2 laser. And when I do small areas and I want pure ablation, there's no better laser than the erbium laser. If I want to ablate a mole, ablate a syringoma, ablate something that's finite and round, erbium is clean with the exception of bleeding. It's the best laser out there. There's no doubt about it. When I'm doing broad areas, I like CO2 because to me it's faster, because when I do 1 pass aggressively with CO2, I'm getting this zone of thermal damage combined, like maybe 200 microns or so total from the epidermis down to the dermis. And it's very reliable and it's very smooth. I use the erbium, I have to make multiple passes. You can be more aggressive and make less passes with higher microns per pass if you wanted to. But I find it takes longer, and then you get more bleeding with it. So those are the things I don't like about it. So if you told me to do a full face erbium tomorrow, I do the same thing I do with the CO2, but it'd probably take me twice as long. And it's probably because I don't do that much anymore. I do almost all full face CO2 and just do erbium in the focal areas. But there are advantages and disadvantages of both. And clearly you can do good things with both lasers. You have to be conservative in both lasers around the jawline. And this area is really underprivileged skin. I think you and I both found that out the hard way sometimes working along here.
Yeah.
It's tough. So I think as long as you know those devices well, they can both serve you well.
Hey listeners, don't forget to submit your questions for the second part of this series. All of your questions will be answered by the guests on the second part of their episode. Okay, get back to listening. Hi everyone, it's Kathy Toronto. Did you know the making of a multi-million-dollar Medspa podcast is one piece of a whole training company? As longtime members of the aesthetic industry, my husband Matt and I have created Mint Aesthetics to provide dedicated training to aesthetic professionals across the country. Whether you prefer hands-on training, immersive virtual sessions, or the flexibility of online e-courses, Mint has a training option for you. Elevate your skills with our expert-led hands-on training. We will gain practical expertise and refine your techniques. Dive into our immersive virtual training sessions led by industry experts right from the comfort of your own space. Looking to expand your knowledge base? Our online e-courses provide a comprehensive curriculum designed to enhance your expertise at your own pace. And for those seeking to take their business to the next level, our specialized business consulting services offer tailored strategies for growth and success. Learn how you can take your aesthetic skills to the next level at mintaesthetics.com.
Yeah. I think that the reason I wanted you to talk about it is because, if people hear me, they're going to hear, I always talk, I do a preceptorship every other month, and I always talk about CO2 and where I started and the differences and whatever. And so I have, some of the things that bother you don't bother me as much. But I do believe that I built a practice using CO2 from 95 to 2000, and it still works. And so I wanted people out there to know that if you want to learn how to do the CO2, you might go to Vic. Don't come to me.
I wouldn't say that. I still remember this one time you were doing a demonstration. It might have been in Boston. I was a fellow, I think. and you were doing the sharpening. You're really big on that sharpening, silk touch, and
Early on.
yeah, that was your laser. And I remember watching you and think, this guy, your movements were so precise. I mean, you were moving that thing, that circle, like a 7 or 8 millimeter circle. Now this guy's really got the best hands. I knew you're a plastic surgeon, but I figured maybe that's why his hands are better, because he's
Well, that's very nice of you to say, but I tell you what, that's a device that had a very, very little margin for error. And I didn't know what, I mean, I think a lot, that was not the best resurfacing laser. I just had to make it work, and I was young, and that was the company I was working with at the time. And that's really kind of you to say, but that's, those were the crazy years from 95 to 2000 when that came out.
It was. But one thing I learned with that laser, because I'm using it again, our Ultra Pulse just went bad a few months ago. So I'm using the AccuPulse, which is just a reborn silk touch. And what's interesting is I'm using it a lot more, but in feather touch mode, the newer mode they came out with, which is feather touch.
Oh, really?
Works really well. It's very smooth, and you don't get all the prolonged erythema. I mean, you get erythema, but it's got to work and everything. But it's much safer than silk touch mode. Now we use silk touch mode around the, more in the mouth area where I have deep wrinkles. And most of the face I use was so-called feather touch mode. And it's really fast. You can use, big spot. You can do the whole face in 25 minutes. It's pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
So that's what I like about it. So the old silk touch, reborn, what's funny is the company that at one time competed with each other, now they make both lasers, which Luminous makes both the AccuPulse and the Ultra Pulse, which is kind of interesting because those were competitors 30 years ago.
Yeah, that is great. Well, I'm going to switch a little bit about it, because you've been, I didn't ask you, we're not going to spend much time on this, but how did you decide to start your career? Did you start your career in the Navy?
Yes. Yeah, the Navy. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, the Navy has this program called Health Profession Scholarship Program, which is like ROTC for medical school. And so I wanted to go to Tulane, and my dad said, well, you have to go to Mississippi. I can't pay for that. But so I got into that program, and it was good. I came out to San Diego as an intern, did my dermatology residency after a couple of years in Japan. And then after finishing a few years, I didn't want to just be a general dermatologist. And I wanted to do something with devices. And I heard about this guy, Rox Anderson. And I called him and went up there and did an interview. And then the Navy said they would fund the fellowship. I talked to the Navy and said, no, we'll send you up there, and you just have to give us 2 more years, which was very kind to them. And then that's why I did the fellowship. I was funded, went up there with Rox, and it was good. Then came back and did another 7 years in the Navy and did my 20, majoring mainly just doing the lasers back and teaching when I came back.
Well, I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, but because I think everybody is in different types of practices. I was in, as you know, I was in the largest group in the country for a long time, and then about 3 years ago, I went out on my own, and I learned so much about, I took for granted that, when I started the other career, there's your desk. I didn't have to worry about insurance. I didn't worry about anything else and whatever. And I suspect that's a little bit like you in the Navy and with scripts, but still, how do you, one of the things that, how do you try to set, your culture and, your patient experience and things like that with your business? Cause I think it's important. And I always want to know, we've never talked about that, but I'm sure they come to you. You are tremendously, to me, just a very nice guy, a funny guy. You're a caring individual, and I know you want to portray that, but you work in a big monster clinic. Are you able to help? Are you able to control that? Or
I'm lucky. I've been here a long time, so I have a lot of dedicated patients, and but we don't have a lot of the frou-frou stuff. They did build a nice waiting area with nice glass cases for me and everything like that. And the building's nice, and we're a relatively affluent area of San Diego, which is nice. So expectations of our patients would be, even if it was more of a Spartan type environment, they would expect cleanliness and all that. So we have all that, but I don't have the control like you would have in your private practice now. Control over little things that you need to buy, little changes you want to make, IT decisions, medical decisions. Those kind of decisions most of those are out of my hands. Deming had this famous guy from Japan. He was teaching Japan about cars in the 70s. You have a circle of control and a circle of concern. Most of our circles of concern are way out here, and most of us, our circle of control is this small.
Exactly.
And big institutions, that's exactly the problem. I'm kind of responsible with the parking situation, the nurses being happy, this person being happy, my computer working fine, but I don't control all those things. So, and that's always a problem. So we're always kind of fighting that battle every day. So in the end, I just try to put that aside and just concentrate on what's ahead of me, which is the patient and making the patient happy. And one of the great things about being at a big institution is I have a lot of lasers, and some of them were bought with philanthropy money and things like that, which really wouldn't be possible in most private practices. So the bottom line here is a little bit less, the business side is a little easier for me to manage. My friends have gone to private practice, although they never regretted it. They all said it was really hard at first. They had to put a lot of time into it. I was talking to Gilly Manavali, in Korea, and he has a thriving practice in Charlotte, really great guy, smart guy. And he says it's hard every day, every day employees, this and that, it's just one thing after another. And I said, yeah, I get it, because I get it even here. But I don't have to really manage it as much as I would in a private practice. So for all the lack of control I have a little more security and that sort of thing. So you have to,
and you don't have to deal with a lot of the administrative stuff, right?
Yeah, in California, it's very labor friendly. If people just kind of leave, and we have very liberal policies for employees, which I guess whether it's good or bad, it's bad if you're trying to get the job done. Even if there's a reason for somebody to take an absence, if they're not here, they're not here. So it's so those are the kind of things that I don't have to worry about quite as much. And we're pretty efficient. I have a really good nursing staff, very motivated administrators. And I think that's the key. Good IT. Last night I got locked out of my account. I called Scripps within 5 minutes. They locked me back in. If I was in private practice, I don't know what I would do. Maybe you have some third-party person you're using. I don't even know what I would do. I'd probably panic and dial 911. So those are kind of things that are kind of nice about being at a big institution. But things like purchasing and things that take too many signatures, a lot of signatures for each event.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I went in with some of the best people and most famous people in the country, and I was very privileged to do that. And again, they literally walked in and said, "There's that. Here's your secretary." Da da da. And I did that at private practice, also at the medical school, and so now that I started all over at an age that was way too old to do that. It's the best thing I've ever done. I'm super happy now, 3 years in, just like you said. But I went back and called my benevolent dictator who did all that for us, and I said, "Man, I owe you so much. I have no idea what you were going through." So that's absolutely true. But Vic, I'm going to switch here. I don't know that you'll have an answer for this right off the top of your head, but in terms of looking back over your practice, what are one or two of the either surprises or the hardest lessons you've learned that have either changed you or shaped you or something like that in your practice? Is there anything that pops to mind on something like that or not?
Yeah, I think the things that I think going slower is something I still have to learn to do. I tend to want to go fast. I always tell people it's not fast dermatology, it's good dermatology fast. Stole that from Seinfeld with the chicken thing, but it's
I like that.
But it's because people complain with Dr. Ross, you get good results, but you're too fast and you don't want to, I'll talk to people a long time if I have time. If I have an extra 10 minutes, I'd love to talk to every patient, and we can talk about anything you want to talk about. But there's a time when you're sort of mission oriented, and I kind of wish I was not so mission focused. But I think when you're in a zone, you don't want to be too distracted. When the nurses are laughing too much, I kind of get a little, I get a little irritated, not because they're having fun, because I'm wondering if they're concentrating on the job. I found that when you're having fun on the job, that's great, but there's a point where a little too much fun, next thing you know, you're putting hypertonic saline with the Botox. It's just a fine line. So I'm trying to manage that, keep the pace good for the nurses and the staff and myself, but still be efficient and still take care of patients. So I struggle with that all the time. And I've made some mistakes, frankly, by being probably too fast. Sometimes it went too fast, and sometimes just unpredictable things. I always tell residents and fellows, it's not the cases you worry about that get you, because those ones you're worried about, you're in there and you're worried and you're probably looking at everything, and you think nothing's going to go wrong. This is an easy case. I had a case where this patient had taken gold 30 years before for rheumatoid arthritis. I went to Q-switch laser. She got these blue spots. After about 6 spots, I stopped, but it was too late. And that was really my fault for not really asking her enough questions and just kind of plodding along. I think it was an easy case. I'm treating a lentigo with a Q-switch laser. This is like my list of top 5 easy things. So it's that dog that bites you from the behind. You're walking along and you think everything's going well. Those are the cases I think you have to be worried about. It's not always the cases where you're kind of tense. It's those cases, and I think I'm constantly trying to get better at that.
God, when you're talking about that, you remind me of my mentor and hero, who was the guy that I was just talking about, the senior partner we had. Is he was really a fun guy and a great guy to talk to, but in the OR, there was no jacking around. There was like he might, if you walked in there, you'd think, God, this guy's really a jerk.
Yeah, right.
But the point was that he was fast and he was focused. And so he's the kind of doctor you'd want. So I hope the people listening realize, and I know your patients know this, Vic, but the fact that you care. I was going to say, if I hire somebody, I want to hire that person that's still 20 years later having those dreams about being late for a test. I want that guy that's worried.
I have those dreams. Late to flights for some reason. I constantly have those. But yeah, it's cool. I don't want my pilot, like on that Korean flight yesterday. I'm hoping those pilots they're not thinking about their wives or kids too much. They're thinking about that cockpit and just for those 10 hours or 8 hours, that's what they care about the most. And then when they get done, they can drink and party and joke and
right.
karaoke. But I don't want them doing it in the cockpit.
I hear that. So if you went back and look back, I know that you really are a humble guy and you give a lot of people credit, but looking back on it, what are one or two of the most, you think the greatest accomplishments or your rewarding accomplishments, maybe research, things you've contributed? I could certainly, I do this preceptor, Vic. I just want you to know that these papers that make a difference, that determine how technology was delivered, and you're all in that talk. Your papers are all in that talk from things you've done over the years. And so I don't know that I've ever told you that, but it's just surprising. I just last Saturday, I said, whenever you see Vic Ross's name or Joel Cohen's name on a paper, you need to stop and read that, because these guys are very smart. They're very well thought out. So anything that jumps off the page that you said, I got lucky on that one, accomplishments.
Well, it all comes down to rocks again, but I think the ideas rocks gave me were helpful ones. I mean, the photon recycling paper that finally got published 25 years after we did the work was probably the best paper that never got published for 25 years that finally got published, because it was good work. We actually, rocks had this model, and the model worked, and the physics worked, and everything worked, and we never published. But that's been integrated into a lot of devices, which is kind of neat. So that's been a cool thing. Doing the pulstration work with the erbium laser with Cyton early on, and the early work with the CO2 laser, I think they've been helpful articles. So there are a lot of articles where you write your experiences, and those are good. I think they're very, very valuable for physicians who see patients, but that has to start from somewhere to go to the next level. So acne we're working on now, and there's some foundational reasons why things might work or not work. So I think those are the things that we need to look at as the basic. Rocks always talks about first principles, and that's really what it's all about. If you go from first principles and work yourself up to the clinical application, that's where you have to start. Yeah.
Well, you contributed a ton. I was going to ask you the next question about what you're excited on that you're working on now. And you'd said some things about acne. You probably can't talk about a lot of it, but
the acne stuff, acne is exciting, I think. But I think what's exciting, and I think the next generation, and we're working with some companies with this, is feedback between the physician and the device. In other words, the device will give you more feedback. Simple things like pigment meters have already been integrated into devices to give you some guidance as to optimization of settings. But I think it's going to go further than that. We're going to have cameras which will analyze the face and maybe even give you settings based on that. And at some point in the future, different types of heat sensors, three-dimensional investigations of the skin, and then also the therapies are going to get better. One day we probably will not sit in an office and aim a laser at a skin. There'll be a scanner that'll find the brown spot, fire, go to the next spot, fire, go to the next spot, and fire. And that's technology's already there. It just hasn't been commercially viable yet. Some of these technologies are not new technologies, but they haven't been commercially viable technologies. But now with enhanced computers, AI, and all this, I think you're going to see some of these things happen. Maybe not my lifetime, but I really envision one day you'll be like at the TSA with your luggage going through. You'll be on that TSA belt, and lasers will be inside the chamber, and they'll be firing at the targets and hopefully not missing. But I think that's not that far away.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've got a couple of companies I'm working with now, and robotics and AI, are part of it. And we're certainly not there, but and I think that people that, a patient may not, it may scare a patient, but you and I both know that, is impressed. I learned something today that I may have impressed you once in my life, which I was really happy about hearing about my technical ability. But I don't care how good you are, we're not going to beat a scanner.
Yeah.
We're human beings, and so I think the patients will need to understand that this is an advance. This is not because we're lazy. It's not because any of that. I mean, it's really exciting stuff for us that those of us that know, hey, it's going to be better. It's going to be better, easier for us.
I agree. Yeah, it's going to get better. It's going to be a matter of time, but all that's going to get better. And I think one of the problems in pleasing patients now is that the technology is so great out of the medical arena and with outside of dermatology, particularly aesthetic dermatology. You take your smartphone, you can turn your car on from across the world, start it up. Why can't you cure melasma, Dr. Ross? Why can't you do some of these simple things that would seem very simple?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've raised the bar, and not our fault, but we raised the bar into thinking people can take kind of a magic wand and make their skin go from flawed, like my little lentigo here. That'll come back if I treat it. Most patients get mad about that. They say, Dr. Ross, you said that lentigo would go away. You said it would go away 100% and it would never come back. And so even though we don't tell them that, that's the expectation. I think part of that expectation is because they can turn on Netflix and watch a show in 3 minutes, and any song they want to listen to from the 70s within 3 seconds. And so I think, how can your laser not make me perfect? And it can't, because of the biology part. The physics part is not that hard. I always say that, the heating and predicting the heating and all that stuff is hard, but the reaction to that heating, the reaction to that trauma by the skin is less predictable.
So how do you handle patients that come back that are unhappy, Vic, in terms of explaining what happened? I mean, we all have our pearls, and everybody's different, but I'd love to know yours.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest complaint we have is inadequate removal of brown lesions and probably rebound melasma. PIH, I guess, is we could just term it.
Hey listeners, it's Karen, the marketing director of Aesthetic Care Medspa here, and I wanted to share an incredible resource that has changed the marketing game for our virtual events here at Aesthetic Care. Our events partner will provide all of the items that you need to put on a professional, organized virtual event with ease. You provide the assets, pictures of your staff, or whatever treatment that you're trying to promote only takes 90 minutes or so, and they do everything else. Following the event, they'll even provide you with detailed data analytics so you can see exactly how many people attended, who stayed for the entire event, track who's interested in getting your treatment or special that you're promoting. You will even have automated follow-up texts. I'm telling you, it will make your virtual events easy, breezy, and they do all of the marketing. It's incredible. For more information or to see a case study or two from Aesthetic Care Medspa, check out the link in the notes below.
I have a paragraph in my consent form that basically says, if you don't accept that as a risk, don't do the procedure. Despite having that in the consent form, I just got a note through the portal today, that dreaded portal, and the patients just ask all the time. And she said, I still have some brown spots after the treatment. What happened? Well, what happened is I told you that was going to happen. And when I show the pre and post pictures, I always show residual brown spots. And I say, this is what we expect. We don't expect every brown spot to go away. So I think the way to deal with most patients are very reasonable. First of all, I think 80% are very reasonable. Oh yeah, I remember you telling me that. A lady today who said, you should treat me in April. There's 2 spots that are still there. What can I do to fix it? That's very, very nice. Another patient with the same exact consent form, same counseling, same outcome will say, Dr. Ross, you're the worst in the world. You left these 2 spots. And these were the 2 spots I really cared the most about. The other spots I didn't even care about.
Of course.
Two exactly the same patients. They can look the same. And so the one that's difficult, what I'll usually do with them is just do like a free touch up and then kind of discourage them from coming back, because they're never going to be happy. It really is hard with patients. You don't always know. My wife always says, well, don't treat the crazy patients. I said, it's not as easy as you think, because some of the patients who to me are the most odd. They're the most thankful and most loyal and best patients. You can't go by the kind of a little bit strange test. That doesn't work. Maybe the mean test is better. If they're mean, outright mean, probably you shouldn't treat them or shouldn't treat them again. But it is hard. It's a hard read. We all do a little psychiatry, and the patients do it on us too, I think, which is reasonable. And despite all our efforts, there's always be some patient that I didn't predict. I thought they were really reasonable in the visit, in the immediate post-op, and they turn out to be kind of really not good patients.
I always want to say, at what point did you really think that I stayed up all night trying to figure out a way to screw you over through the treatment? I mean, you lose trust. You lose trust for some reason. You go, well, I'm the same guy. Just if you'll just be patient, I'll treat you for the rest of your life. And if you're going to be crazy, I think I'm done. I don't think I'm good at. One of my favorite lines is, I just really believe that you deserve better than me. I don't think I'm good enough to do this. But
that's a good line. I do that to Mitch. I'll say I'll tell Mitch, I'm sending somebody to use. And it's not really a good patient, but somebody maybe you can handle. But it is hard. And thank heavens, the great majority of patients are good patients. Just like I think we're good physicians. I think we have a mutual interest in getting better, both of us. But there's always that outlier, and it is hard.
5 to 10% of our patients, and I think it's true with any industry. I've asked tons of people, but everybody says the same thing. 5% of your clients, patients, whatever, is 95% of the work. But all right. Well, I'm going to ask you a couple more things, as we got about 5 minutes left here. Some fun stuff. Vic, what fills your tank, and in life? I mean, what if you need to get away, get filled? I mean, what's something that brings you great pleasure? It could be at work or away from work. I don't care. Yeah, I mean,
work brings me pleasure. If I'm not working, I feel a little bit empty. I guess you call it a workaholic, but I think workaholism is not all bad. It's not like alcoholism, but exercising a lot, running, like I ran this morning. Running is good. I think running, you're kind of away from everything. You're not listening to anything. I'm not a big cell phone guy. I try to stay away from cell phones as much as I can, smartphones. I have to do stuff because you have to use it. But those are the things that fill the tank, just seeing patients and getting some exercise and being around the family and just, trying to make the day as kind of happy as it can be.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, I have the 3 girls. One's in med school. She's unfortunately applying to neurology residencies this fall, which I'm not happy about. But so she's visiting now from NYU, and I made one last attempt to switch her to dermatology. I told Roy, I said, Roy, I can't even get her to go to your clinic across the street. She's that adamant she didn't want to be a dermatologist. That's unfortunate. I got one in Berkeley just finished. She's trying to find a job, and my last one's just starting Northeastern in Boston this fall. So my last of the 3 girls. So,
all right.
And, my wife is working, trying to take care of the kids. We'll be empty nesters next year, so maybe a little less work for her, I hope.
My daughter, as you know, is a dermatologist, and her kids are 7, 5, and 2, roughly. And so she works 3.5 days, and she's off. And she told me the other day she was just frazzled, come by the house, and she said, Dad, she said, when I'm off these days, she said, I just want to go back to work. Yeah. Raising these kids are the hardest job by far.
This would be a refuge for me. It's a refuge anyway. But when I come here, I feel like I'm kind of at home. I've got my little office around me, and the nurses, I spend a lot of time with them, like most doctors do with their staff, more than their family. But yeah, that's where the joy comes in. I think when patients are happy, we're really fortunate in dermatology and plastic surgery too. I'm sure you have a lot of thankful patients. You don't have to tell them a lot of unfortunate stories, give them bad news. Being an oncologist would be just so hard to tell people bad news all the time, or you have good news when there's a remission or something, but overall it would be very taxing.
It's tough.
To do that every day.
Yeah, your daughter's going to find that out. I know, as you know.
She's going to have a lot of tough patients, a lot of incurable diseases, and maybe there'll be some breakthroughs. You never know. It could be. Yeah,
but dealing with those patients, I think that in many ways, Vic, I know it sounds crazy, and I'm doing aesthetics, but when I look back on my career, I've done it in aesthetics, but those people, when I was doing, my daughter went into dermatologist and into dermatology. And, I told her when she was even going to medical school, I said, are you sure you want to do this? It's a long road, whatever. And she said, what else can I do? And I said, because, you never saw me. Dad used to work for a living. I used to really work. Like I would be up at night, putting flaps on cancer patients and whatever. But those people that have cancer and having someone that's compassionate to walk through that is probably more help than the drugs they provide. So I your daughter can still be. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I know she'll do great. Hey, listen, do you have any as we close? Do you have any? Just for people to know you, so don't think I'm weird. But like my wife, if we drive to Colorado every summer, and when people drive slow in the left lane, it's like she goes off. What are your pet peeves? I know you've already told us that talking and having too much fun in the OR are in the treatment room is one. Any other pet peeves, Vic?
The real pet peeves for me at home, I don't really have any pet peeves, but at work, I just, you just want to have the room stocked, everything ready to go. I think lapses and inefficiency are my pet peeve. When I know it could be done better and faster, not always faster, but better, that's a pet peeve of mine. And when I go to the Navy now, I volunteer there twice a month, and it's so inefficient. I just have to bite my lip because I'm there to have fun and teach the residents. But I really have to control myself because they just take so long to get things set up, and they don't know where things are, and they're looking for stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I just go, okay, because we couldn't do that in our practice here. So, I mean, it is kind of like the left lane thing. If you know that person should get out of the lane, you could pass them, but they're not doing it. It's very frustrating. So I get it. So I think that's the thing, is to be efficient, compassionate, and accurate. I mean, to do all those three things, that's the goal every day.
Yeah, well, you and I both think like that. I was chief of the VA at one point in my career, and if you and I know we both like efficiency and things to move well, and we have a short fuse on that point. The VA and the military is not the place to go if that's your problem.
That's right. The military was okay, but better than the VA. I always thought it was better than the VA. I remember I told one of the COs I had to do this moonlighting exit. When we moonlighted, we had to do an interview with the CO, and one guy was an admiral. He's a psychiatrist. And I said, well, Admiral, this is the best socialized medicine can be. I said, I think our model is the best socialized medicine can be as far as efficiency, but it can't ever rival private practice. He was asking me some questions. He said, I get it. You're right. So I think, but you also have the time to talk to patients. I used to eat lunch with my colleagues in the Navy. We'd have a little lunch for 30 minutes. We talk. I don't do that anymore. I have an egg salad sandwich. I wolf it down and go see patients again. So that's the bad thing about this efficiency and all these other things.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, Vic, we're right up on the hour. And what else? Is there anything else you want somebody to know about you? Or anything we've missed?
No, I think all the highlights are. You've been that's good.
Well, I've learned a lot, like I thought I would, and so I just want to thank you for giving us your time, and hopefully we'll see you again and follow up, where maybe you could follow up and help ask some questions that we might have. It would be a little shorter than this, but in any case, we enjoyed it today. I wish I was in San Diego. It was 106 today here in Dallas, and every day I've stepped off the plane in San Diego, I said, why am I not living?
I'm at Starbucks. I'll be wearing this jacket because it's probably 68 degrees outside.
Not going to hear it. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for following us on Minnesetics.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk to y'all later.
Here, you bet. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. We would love it if you left a review to help other providers and clinics find us. Also, if you want more information about anything we discussed in this episode, check out our show notes. Until next time, this has been the Making a Multi-Million-Dollar Medspa podcast.